90s nostalgia,
Pink ghosts.
killer ice cream men,
Alternate realities.
all that and so much more in this episode of the Deadlights Podcast.
The devil's eyes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
You're gonna need a bigger potion.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I'll play a game. You soon to be mine. Live, dead, lives.
Welcome to the Deadlights Podcast. I'm your host, Sam.
And I'm your host, Matt, bringing you yet another deep dive into horror.
Deep and dive into horror. Please make sure you like, subscribe, turn on those notifications.
And please give us all your deadly comments. We want them all. All the deadly ones.
All the deadly ones, the most deadliest
The
ones.
deadliest
Please, and
the
especially for
comments.
this one, I feel like we're going to have a very, very good discussion of the movie that we just watched.
We just watched a great film from last year.
From last year.
Close one. Close ties.
Yeah, I threw this in there because it was got some attention from last year, and that movie is I Saw the TV Glow from 2024, written and directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. A teenager just trying to make it through life in the suburbs is introduced by a classmate to a mysterious late-night TV show. Oh, it sounds so simple, but so much more than that.
Simple dimples.
Yes.
And often something very simple can allow you to go rather deep into it.
This is an experience of a film. I would say that off the bat. I would say if you haven't seen this movie, you should watch this movie, maybe before you hear us talk about it, because it's definitely one that you have to experience yourself. We're not going to be able to get to every single tiny little detail in this movie because there's so much going on. But we're going to do our best to cover the really, important parts of this movie. And it's seeing this kind of movie that takes me back to film school, actually. Something that the director of the film department used to say was, film, it allows you to go to a place that you never before would have gone or otherwise could go. And I think that this movie is a great example of taking us to a perspective that some people could never get to, but still feel like we can relate to it and get our own personal piece out of it. Like you said, it's a very personal film. We're dealing with a transgender person's experience. And the beauty of this film is that, yes, it's very much about that experience, but we are allowed to come into that space too, even if we're not a transgender person, and relate to it and feel alongside with, what's going on with the characters in this movie. And it brings us all together in that way. And I think this movie is really important for just that fact alone of, bringing people into a space that they probably have never been in before.
And again, this movie is like, as much as it is on the nose about what an individual is going through and feeling trapped and encapsulated, it's like, it's not like just being, spelled and written out. It's just like you are getting very much small pieces of the semblance that is just really stuck in a feeling state. And then really the remembrance state, what it is like going back in nostalgia and remembering what that world was like. When we are kids, number one, it's like, and I'm also speaking from growing up in a fortunate situation where it's just like things weren't necessarily in a place of scarcity or something. So I don't mean to speak for everybody by any means, but there was just as a kid's state of mind, this wonder in the world and the way you see it that is so much more like, yes, larger than life, but also like there's a lot of hope for when you get older and stuff. That as we kind of get older, grow into what becomes adulthood and stuff, that feels really subdued and kind of like knocked down. It's just like, no, that's not the way things are. And the movie really encapsulates, though I saw things differently and like in my remembrance, my way of remembering childhood and stuff, it still imparted so much of that, like that a little bit of disconnect in the way, the lens in which you saw things then versus the way, life comes and kind of smacks you there forward. And again, that's a little bit vague, but a lot of this movie is kind of this vagueness.
Yeah.
That you are left to really just kind of have your own internal kind of relation and, not grinding of the gears, but just like it churns a lot of those emotional states forward that are going to trigger a lot of that nostalgic feeling, thought, remembrance.
Yeah.
And I love that so much.
It really feels like anyone can take something from this movie. And I think that is what's really important, because for so long, movies have been told from one specific perspective, and marginalized communities have had to find their own message within that, but it's still being, this pretty much cis white male message. But now we have a film that is from a marginalized community's perspective, and it's a reversed role. And we are still finding meaning in it. And I think that that's just an important point of this movie that, is why I think everyone should see this, because I really think anyone can grab something from this movie and feel for what these characters are going through.
Exactly. And specifically, if it isn't something to your own experience, at least having more empathy.
Let's get into it, though. Let's get into the can.
Crack this can.
Open up the can. Open up the can. And we started to kind of touch on it. This movie is definitely more experiential, and I think that very much comes through how, it's shot for sure with the colors. A lot of, pinks, blues.
Green was really hitting.
It was like everything was like a green base.
Yeah.
And then all those other colors were able to like really pop.
Yeah, dance off of that.
On top of this, green and grimy.
It's really like kind of saturated, neon-y color time. I mean, what the opening? We get the opening from the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So we've got all that good chalk writing on the sidewalk, and that's with. No, we don't see the ice cream truck right.
Ice cream truck is in the distance.
It is in the distance at that point.
It's right in the beginning.
It's fever dream-esque feeling like right away that you're just kind of...
It really is going towards this feeling of nostalgia that we already started talking about. Because when we're thinking back on things, which we realized pretty quickly that this movie is Owen thinking back on his experiences with Maddie.
It was raining last night and I couldn't sleep. So I started my favorite TV show again. The Pink Opaque.
We think back on things very differently than they actually happen. There can be a lighter lens to it. There can be a darker lens to it. And so I think that the start is we're kind of already living in this, hyper surrealist reality, which is maybe a little bit how people would think back on their life. So everything is really lending towards that, and even down to how they're editing this movie together. It's very not, it's chronological, but it's not, I would say, conventional as far as scene to scene to scene.
We jump back into I think it's 92.
96.
96, thank you. That's where we first kind of really kick things off. He's in middle school, and he's got this two-tone vest on that's beige in the front, plaid in the back. I mean, it's just the 90s to the T, to the extent that everybody from our generation is going to remember the rainbow parachutes in PE class.
Oh, yeah.
That you all get around and waft up, get down underneath.
Totally.
And I mean, this movie is steeped in that initial sense is really well grounded into where we're going to be ultimately kind of going. And
then from there, Maddie introduces Owen to The Pink Opaque, which is a late night TV show very Buffy the Vampire-esque.
Has a new supernatural infestation that no exterminator can take care of. It's the attack of the Drain Lords. 10:30 p.m., 9:30 Central, this Saturday night on the Young Adult Network.
He's really just kind of becomes enamored with it, and she already is very enamored with it in this kind of like escapist kind of way. So he too, they're both in situations where people would want to escape. He has a very seemingly at least distant and probably abusive father. She also immediately establishes that her stepfather is abusive. So they both have reasons why they would want to escape. And so for them, this TV show is an anchor. It's like a lifeline that they can turn to and try to find some sort of meaning in all of this chaos that they're both living in.
Sometimes the pink opaque feels more real than real life.
They also go back to this continuous shot of people looking in screens and like this, like almost like hypnotized in the glow of the TV. And I think that goes to that of like really trying to stare into these screens and find meaning in your life sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I think that's like really on the head too with like the broader like theme that we're kind of getting to, that like people can relate often so much more of their own reality in real life in a show like this, or something that has that much meaning and value to them. Going back a little bit, we have a little bit of an age gap between them. Owen has never seen the show. Comes up on Maddie reading like a guide book, right, basically, and he's like immediately, he's never seen the show, and he's like, that looks like the best book ever.
Yeah, it's the official episode guide. Do you watch? No. Oh.
At that time, we can remember too, it's like we're oversaturated with programs, TV shows and everything now. Like when we were kids, like everybody, the shows you watched, everybody was in on, you talked about them. Like the next day, that episode and everything, if you weren't in on it, then you kind of feel left out or whatever.
There's no streaming, there's no binging.
Yeah, so there's none of that. And like he knows of like the essence of what the show is, but he's just not had the chance to be able to crack into it himself yet. Yeah. And this is like his first opportunity to be able to connect with somebody else who is going through their own individual journey and is having their own isolated kind of and repressed feelings, and finding so much out of it, and how they create that bond together through specifically the pink opaque.
After that first sleepover, I couldn't work up the courage to say more than 3 words to Maddie Wilson at a time. But when I told her I still wasn't allowed to watch the show, she started leaving tapes for me.
Maddie starts leaving these tapes in the dark room for Owen, and she's writing all these things out. I didn't have necessarily so much like VHS tapes, though we were in the era of that, and I do remember recording specific episodes of things on VHS tapes and over-recording over family tapes.
How dare you?
But it was like, for me, what I remember is so much like mixtapes, like CD burned mixtapes, and like somebody, you'd write out the track list or something, and you'd get all that, like putting stars and hearts and all this in like colorful fucking pens, and it's just like there was... I really appreciated what that was, and again, this connection that they had through the physical media, the sharing of that, their shared enjoyment within that.
They're kind of like love letters in a way,
yeah.
That she's leaving for him, and even though they don't talk, they don't talk to each other, but she leaves him these tapes, and they're able to connect through the show. That is something that is kind of paralleling the show, because in the pink opaque, it's very much about these two characters that connect to each other through psychic connections.
And they never meet up in person, right?
No. Just in the pilot episode. But they can communicate via the psychic plane. So each episode, they help each other fight a new monster from across the county.
I think the movie does a great job of really paralleling that show, those characters' journeys, with the characters that we're following, Owen and Maddie. They are those characters. And as we learn through the movie, they actually are those characters.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. And so this blending as we continue going on, where the show is coming in and we're not really knowing, is that the show or is that reality? I thought they were doing simple things where they had the VHS filter on the Pink Opaque show, and then they would cut to Owen watching it without the filter. They would cut back to the show without the filter. They would cut back to Owen with the VHS filter on it. It's like, it's this very simple, just kind of, we're blending what is real, what is not.
We are the Pink Opaque. It's our destiny.
I don't even have my learner's permit yet.
How can I have a destiny?
And the last thing that I want to say in the can specifically is about the two main actors, Justice Smith and Jack Haven, who play Owen and Maddie.
Voice of Owen was actually inspired by Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is one of my favorite films, and I had watched an EBK interview of Julianne Moore talking about how she wanted a separation of the head and the body. I just wanted to create my own separation of head and body because Owen is not comfortable in his body, and me and Jane talked about the voice feeling stuck in the upper chest. It also is in conjunction with the asthma that he struggles with throughout the film, and as he gets older, the asthma gets worse and worse.
Very much going back towards this stuck feeling that Owen is feeling, and then everything else around just feeling so uncomfortable in his body, and that comes through, I think, so well in his portrayal of Owen. And then Maddie, Jack had to play 3 separate versions of Maddie.
In 1996, she's 14. That Maddie was inspired by like stutter 90s boy, really like loose physicality, like almost like hasn't claimed her body yet and is sort of like collapsed in a mode of self-protection and hasn't completely given up on this like childlike wonder. And it comes out when she talks about the show. And then Maddie is like her ability and her rage, and that was like Courtney Love's Maddie. And then the final Maddie, I really wanted her to feel like a creature, something that doesn't really know how humans act, and also something in her like she hasn't quite adjusted to the reality of the Midnight Realm.
I thought they did great. Yeah. Performance-wise, hats off for sure.
Yeah, and to that point with Justice, I didn't realize that. That tidbit is great because you know, it's like things aren't always supposed to be. It's like, even though I by no means dislike the characters, but I did have a lot of my own like kind of tension, anxiety, angst, just like watching some of his physicality and movements, the awkwardness in conversation. You're just like, God, come on, you're rooting for him, but it's that subduedness is you feel it yourself, which is perfect. That's exactly what it was trying to be conveyed. Is like getting that feeling state across of how stuck Owen is in particular.
I think a lot of people feel this way. I think like we live in a world that is constantly replicating itself, and that's like what our relationship to the screen is it's like us trying to understand ourselves by analyzing ourselves through analyzing ourselves through analyzing ourselves. I mean, like even here, like everyone's on their phone, like we are constantly in a state of searching for self-recognition, and we have no inability to actually look at each other and see each other and like fuck up in front of each other.
I think we should get to the meat.
Meat it up.
Let's slab this meat down.
Let's meet the meat.
The filmmaker Jane Schoenbrunn talked about how this movie was a depiction of what is called the egg crack in the trans community, which is the moment when a trans person realizes their identity doesn't correspond to their originally assigned identity. And I have this great quote from Jane that I want to read verbatim, because we got a lot of really good quotes from them, and unfortunately it's not in video, but it's written down, so I want to get this verbatim. But this is what they said. This movie is about the tension between the space that you exist within, which feels like home, and the simultaneous terror and liberation that space might not be able to hold you in your true form. So that's exactly what we're seeing Owen struggle with, you know, his home, these comforts that he's had, you know, watching the Pink Opaque, sleepovers, going to baseball games with his dad, are what he knows as himself and what he feels comfortable in his home. But there's something inside of him that knows that is not reality. And unfortunately, those things are fighting against each other.
Yeah, and that's the great relation to Isabel, her own kind of bashfulness, but the superpower within. It's just like that related, knowing there's something within, but not really being able to embrace it.
Maybe you're like Isabel. Afraid of what's inside you.
Going to that point, what's resonant is those comforts. And we all go back to comforts. Even when comforts are self-destructing to us, it's what is a cycle. It's a habitual cycle that is like just rooted into like a 4-stage system of like a habit. Atomic Habits, a great book if you're curious about habits, good and bad habits or otherwise. But it can relate to anybody on any different plane. And, you know, with the egg crack moment, we know Maddie has already had this experience and embraced what that resonance is for her. With Owen, Owen has it several like moments where it could be several times that could be the egg crack, but it's like he shuts the door on it.
I remember playing in the snow, driving to baseball games.
Those memories were put there to distract you, to keep you trapped.
Like, it's the most recognized point because Maddie tries to come out and help Owen. Years later, comes back, really tries to help Owen recognize this for themselves, but realizes they're not going to be able to do that. That's not for them to make happen necessarily. They can try and open the window, foster a lot of support and stuff around it, but ultimately that's a decision any individual has to come to and make for themselves. Which is, you know, me being in, take a step away from what we're doing in the podcast space here, being in the health and wellness space, working with people is like, that is a crux for any individual to need to make change and stuff is like, you can lead the horse to water. It doesn't mean they're going to drink. You can teach people the ropes, all the things that can be something that can be a benefit in whatever sector of an area they're trying to make improvement on or something. But until that really has a striking resonance with themselves of like, that's truly what they want. And this has got to be one of the hardest areas of that, especially coming from societal pressures, means, and otherwise, and from this era. You know, we're in a slightly different time frame, state of mind now within things. Thankfully, for how people can have more openness and acceptedness, but like at that point was, you know, had to feel like a death sentence in a way, and especially whether or not it's like physical death, it is social death. And again, holding on to those comforts. Once you break free and admit this to yourself, those certain comforts you have and stuff might be lost, might not feel and be the same. Those relationships might deter and change, and that's the big thing, is you're scared of what that's going to change with what is closely tied around you.
I think that's the big, that's the big piece of home, quote unquote, is the relationships and what that can do, how those can change. And that's a big point of this movie, I think, in the end, is that there is this awesome moment that you feel of liberation that we feel for Owen, finally seeing himself, seeing what's inside. But then it's followed up with this moment of having to apologize because that makes other people uncomfortable.
Sorry about that before. Sorry.
And another thing that I saw Jane talk about was this movie is kind of playing out because they wrote this as they were transitioning.
Yes.
Which I think is an important point because they wrote this movie almost out of like an alternate reality if they didn't make that decision to transition. So the character of Owen is a person who's continually fighting against the true person that is within them, and we see what happens to them in the end and the detriments that it can have on you long term. It just feels like you're long suffering and long suffocating.
The longer you wait, the closer you get to suffocating.
should we get into the cook of it?
Let's cook it.
Because I think that what's cool about this movie, I kind of brought it up a little bit, is it's so heavily tied to The Pink Opaque, the show, which is, if anyone is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, which I am a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, currently doing a rewatch right now, you will recognize so many little motifs, little nods that they have to this show, down to the terms that they use, the monster of the week, the big bad, even to like, there's a scene where they use a live band in I Saw the TV Glow, and they did that many times in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where they would feature real bands and have them play like 30 seconds of a song in the middle of a scene, and then they would continue with the episode. So even that, you can tell that Jane is a big Buffy fan. And that is so important, obviously, to these characters, too. This show becomes more real to them than their actual realities.
When you think back on The Pink Opaque, do you ever get confused? Like, does time ever feel like it's not moving normally? Or do you ever have a hard time distinguishing between what happened in the show and what happened in real life?
I love how this movie has these parallel storylines going along it, to a point where they're coming together in the film.
Coming together and almost kind of cross. They cross over in a way where we get again to this point where she's saying how she's going to leave and everything, and then she comes down to Owen and embraces him, takes like the top of his shirt off, pulls his hair back, kind of running her fingers along his skin, real coarse sounding. It's just the sound design. It just like it really, they're just
sandpaper skin. Damn.
But anyways, getting back to the root of it, she draws then the pink ghost that is like the signature look that ties the two characters from the Pink Opaque together on the back of Owen, and this is where we really start to blend over like into reality. She starts talking about like, don't you feel like sometimes the show is more real than real life? We start getting these adages. She falls asleep next to him, kind of curled up. Owen's laying on his back looking up, and there's just like, you see this like static floating in the sky above him, and then him like fiercely trying to wash off this thing, and you see him again as this moment of like another moment of kind of like opening and acceptance that he is feverishly resisting and terrified by, and it's like no, I can't embrace this. But it's this great moment, and then she leaves him the last tape, and then she disappears with only the TV found burning in the back of her house. They put a bunch of police tape up all over her house, which I thought was kind of the crime scene indications of things were a little. Maybe they thought she was dead. She
was somewhere.
I was like, it was a little off. But
that's hilarious. And even like in front of the front yard.
Yeah. But we jump from there again to him in the grocery store. When he sees Maddie, the point I was getting to is he runs up and embraces her, gives her a big hug, and is like, where have you been? Wondering all this stuff. She's really flat, kind of monotone to everything, which she's been previously, but really starts to try to open him up again at this point to Owen's true self.
Will you tell me where you've been all these years?
I've been there. Inside the show.
And Owen is just, he can't grasp around what she's saying. It's like, you're talking about, she starts saying that, did you ever think of the TV show as, more real than what our real lives were, relating to it, blending things from the episode with real life? Does it confuse you ever? And Owen is just like petrified by the idea of this. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great like analogy to relate to, because trying to think of that, like your life actually is wrapped up in this TV show and the reality you're in isn't real, is a fucking scary thought.
Yeah.
To really delve into. It's like, oh, fuck. Shit. And she wants to take him to like, she talks him through this whole like spiel of what happened from the end of the last episode, which is really dark. We get the main big heavy who like completely subdues them.
Mr. Melancholy is coming.
If we're gonna defeat him this time, We're gonna need to harness the full potential of our shared powers. We're gonna need to meet again.
Mr. Melancholy had got to her first. They cut out her heart. They feed her the Luna juice.
Let my poison work its magic. So you won't remember anything.
Basically, Maddie had to kill herself, almost like in real life, bury herself to reawaken in the TV show to find her true self.
Yes.
And that she's trying to come back to help Owen to go through the same process, knowing how scary it is. This is like, yeah, I know how scary this sounds, but like you are living this entrapped life otherwise.
A little bit after my 22nd birthday, I paid this burnout kid who used to hit on me in the food court $50 to bury me alive. I said to myself, this is crazy. What you're doing is crazy. But another part of me knew that it wasn't. I pissed and I shit my pants, and I forced my mouth to produce whatever saliva I could muster, just so I'd have something to drink. I screamed as loud as I could for help. I apologized for the whole thing, and I begged God for someone to come along and save me. I felt myself start to leave myself. And it was like I was watching myself on TV from across the room. And then I was at the surface, gasping for air, rain pouring down on me, thunder and lightning. And I was finally back there, back at our old sleepaway camp.
The level of intensity, or you know what that truly means, again, is just like so over the top for him to be able to relate to, or to trust and believe, to have that trust and that conviction, and to trust that decision for yourself.
Yeah.
So Maddie disappears again one final time, and Owen never sees her again.
Yeah.
But we jump ahead, and the stark reality that she painted for him about him being Isabel rather, buried alive in the show, and that if she doesn't return, he's dying this slow death because you're not getting back to your true self, and you're suffocating, internal suffocation, that not allowing yourself to truly embrace and reflect who you are.
And it's reflected in his asthma that is like completely, it's just like the worst case of asthma I've ever heard.
And everything is going again to that like cookie cutter lifestyle of comforts.
He has a family, he has a home, he has a new TV. Everything should be good, but you can see it's like he's being eaten away inside. Yeah. You're right. That reality that she said came true.
Oh, here's a great quote. You're talking about good quotes, and we'll come back to a few more that we're going to tie into things. But this one really it just struck well within. It was like,
what if I really was someone else? Someone beautiful and powerful. Someone buried alive and suffocating to death. Very far away on the other side of a television screen.
And I mean, that's just essentially
That's it.
That's the film.
That is the film right there. Yes. There are so many. I definitely tip my hat to Jane Schoenbrunn. Very well written. There's some very poignant lines, and I think there's that one scene between Owen and Maddie on the bleachers where there's some very poignant lines in there.
When I think about that stuff, it feels like someone took a shovel and dug out all of my insides, and I know there's nothing in there, but I'm still too nervous to open myself up and check.
And it's just like really heartbreaking lines like that, and really make you feel for these characters. And
that was I think that's where what makes, you know, when films aren't touched by producers and all these other little things, these grubby hands get in there to leave their mark on it, and you get someone who's a true writer, director. I mean, this is why, going back to just, you know, fun early childhood, becoming loving films and everything, as a guy, just like Tarantino was huge. And how could he not be? But the biggest thing that I got so like in my head is like my own fandom, like snobby about, was the fact that he writes and directs all this stuff. So it's like everything is so personal, all the touches and everything becomes so interpersonal to him in the world that he creates versus touching on something else that somebody else wrote. And with Jane, this film is so personal, but not just in like, yes, their own self-experience of things, but just the way they convey this time period. And otherwise, it was just like, you really are encapsulating this moment in a bottle, this kind of like lightning in a bottle moment. It was like, wow, I felt really appreciative for what the story told, and in all of the beats that went through to tell it, from their love for Buffy, that nostalgic 90s vibes, all these things that were very interpersonal to how they saw the world at the time, can be very relating to a lot of other people, 80s, 90s wise, who grew up through that time, and just like the lens of that really it strikes to you.
I really wanted to make a movie about somebody like me growing up, not really understanding myself and the context of where I was in the world, and finding a lot of that through fiction and through TV. The film, I think, in its deepest level, is about a queer journey towards self-discovery.
It's a very valid point of what imparted on so much of us in our childhood and stuff was our relation, and kind of having those vicarious relationships ourselves through characters in TV or film.
And I think that it was the magic of Buffy. The magic of Buffy was you're seeing high schoolers, people that, you know, probably are watching this are also high schoolers, fight monsters and deal with these everyday issues that have personified themselves into a vampire or a robot or whatever, and you're seeing these kids conquer them. And so I think that's what's just so important about those TV shows, and what you're talking about is we can feel like we can conquer these issues because of what we're seeing these people overcome in TV. And I have another quote from Jane. She's got a lot of good ones. Relating to this, they said that a little magic borrowed from art is one of the only ways to survive, and to remind yourself that there is still time. And that was a huge part of this movie, you know, is still finding time to find the strength from even a show like Buffy or The Pink Opaque to make that brave decision.
Yeah, and that's it relates again, that crosses all planes for any individual of like just repressing something down, even if it's just like a hobby or an interest that you've just never like allowed yourself to embrace and experience. And that goes to the adage you always hear people on their deathbed or something like, I wish I would have done more, or, you know, cared more about this, or just like not been so overly concerned. There's just all these things that are really what the ego serves, because the ego, it protects us, but it also is not in our best interest in a lot of times. And a lot of that suppressed action or experience in life comes from our ego's restriction of things, and understandably so. This isn't to get to anybody about that. Sometimes ego is like a weird word, how it like imparts on our heads. I think is often people are like, oh, you're ego tripping and stuff, is like a very self-centered thing. But if it wasn't self-serving in a way, we wouldn't have any means to fight for fucking anything. Or so it's like, it's a very, very needed chemical response. But to that, like, there's again just that ability for anybody at any time, again coming back to that it's like it's kind of not too late, and that there is these wonderful things in like magical realism or something that for each individual that can be very inspiring in that way to like open up that door.
Yes.
Time moves fast these days. Years pass like seconds. I just try not to think too hard about it.
But should we get to the thrill?
Let's thrill.
Let's thrill?
Yeah.
Let's thrill. I think that, on the surface, this movie has many surfaces, but I think that the father figure I kind of talked about as a looming, ominous figure.
Can I stay up late to watch The Pink Opaque tonight?
Isn't that a show for girls?
And Jane had that similar experience in the car with her father relating to Buffy in their childhood.
And the father figure is a scary, honestly, figure throughout the whole movie. Very ominous. Rarely talks.
Yeah,
I think that's his only line. Honestly,
yeah, way in the background. I mean, there's that one scene where he's in front of the TV.
Oh my god!
Distant in the left corner of the frame, and
so
just
creepy.
Big bald head that's really nicely angled towards you too, where you just see all this reflective off the face.
So creepy.
Very
the
fucking
fucking
creepy.
sunken eyes just staring at Owen. Yeah, a creepy, very ominous figure throughout the movie, and I don't like him. I don't like him at all. I don't like Frank. Mr. Melancholy, who is the big bad of the Pink Opaque, another very scary figure that can make you drink Luna juice and make you forget all about who you were and all the powers that you possess, and even the fact that you're dying.
Your real name? Your superpowers? You won't even remember that you're dying.
But honestly, the scariest thing to me in this movie is this continued discussion of time that we have, which is how much time are you losing and how fast are you losing the time? And there's several lines where Maddie and Owen refer to time passing faster, years going like minutes.
Time wasn't right. It was moving too fast. And then I was 21. Like chapters skipped over on a DVD.
That's just the scariest part. This is the reality of what it could be if you don't live your truth.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point again, it's very relatable for anybody in life. I mean, that's a huge point you hear often is just career changes and stuff, or somebody following a certain path that they initially were really drawn to. Maybe they get that, they get burnt out on it, or it just wasn't the true fulfilled calling. But I can personally relate to this just as far as I grew up a fucking huge film buff. That was all, it wasn't all I loved, but it was the biggest thing I loved and what I prided myself on, doing all this research and having this just my own personal knowledge or whatever, and always felt like I'm going to become a filmmaker. This is the path and everything. End up coming to film school, going to film school with you, meeting everybody that we everything we fell into. We start doing everything we would have wanted and loved, coming out of that, young, early friends, the same comedic sensibility. It's we're going to start a sketch comedy group, be shooting all this stuff together. And we get so many years down into it, get to about what I call the quarter life crisis stage, about 25 years old. And I started having a lot of my own inward doubts. It was a lack of fulfillment of what I was doing, and feeling really I was faking the funk, type of I see everybody else around me who can just really eat up all the work we're doing and just live and breathe it. And I felt that was not what I was able to see within it and see within myself, and how I was drawn to it. And I wasn't finding my lane and where that necessarily was. And it didn't mean that it was all for nothing and was not a part of my life or shouldn't have been. But at that time, it certainly was in a way, because I was confused and didn't fucking know. And I didn't know what the hell to do. And for the side tangent real quick going on here, a little backstory with me some more is I ended up moving back home, work construction a year and a half. And then it's I go through my own nostalgic remembrance of my life and what I felt were the breadcrumbs of my life that I most gravitated to naturally as a kid, and kept relating on what that was, why that naturally imparted outside of film and how I love that. But it was things that were more actionable on. It's because I grew up loving watching movies, consuming it, but I wasn't a filmmaker as a kid. I wasn't making short films with my friends and stuff. I had a little handy cam at one point, but it was all bullshit. And I don't mean that to say that so critically of myself, but it just, that's the state that it was I was a little bit more of a consumer and loved to like have conjecture and talk about these things and be in the fandom. And a collector, but like getting onto the actual narrative side, I wasn't finding that voice in that specific space for myself. What I did find is that I really related to a lot of like tenets of health and wellness that my mom had kind of like sprinkled throughout my life. And then finding that for myself and how much that boosted my own self-esteem, was very self-deprecating towards myself before, a lot of like flipping the switch into this like internal state of self-appreciation, self-love. And then wanting to be able to help others with that, and knowing that it's not cookie cutter, that everybody is so bio-individual and so different, and that we all have a different path for what is going to kind of bring this whole natured state to ourselves. And all of that led me to come back to Chicago anyways, right back with everybody here. So, I mean, it was all full circle. And yes, I've like shifted a little bit of where the focal lens was. But I absolutely went through the essence of what a lot of what's driving this film myself, just within what I felt I was doing and what I felt was so personal and related to my life, and like how I express myself to people as this big film guy. And then to admit to myself, like, that's not really who I am as far as like pursuing this career, and to really be able to embrace that and be like, I guess I got to like move home and try and figure out what the right path is. Like, just not even feeling that I could stay here and find that for myself, that I was just going to like fall apart on myself. And that was tough because you guys were all my closest, best friends. And like, I loved all of our everyday engagement of everything together, but it was just like, I saw the drive that everybody had individually in different ways. And I was like, I'm not on this same path right now. And it was really shitty and tough to admit to myself. I felt really lost for a while moving back. I was like, the fuck am I, why did I move back? And now I'm working construction. I'm like, this is not what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was very much just not knowing, because you don't know in the moment, but it was like, I have to trust this process and this like internal voice that I'm getting from myself, that this is what I need to do for myself right now in order to make larger steps forward, and to not basically be in that stuck state that Owen was in, and just carrying forward with that, whether that's like screaming inside of you, suffocating you, and just shortening your lifespan, your quality of life, and otherwise. And so I couldn't be more appreciative for that journey I had gone on myself, bringing me back here. And for me, it was in essence of what that was for me was very much encapsulated by the
Well, and we're so glad to have you back, first of all, is that you're here. And that, again, it's like I was talking about at the top of the movie. This is the power of film. This is the power of art, that we get to all bring our own experiences into the room, but also we're all having a shared experience. And, you know, for Owen, he's a character that we're seeing continually beat down by the pressures of, you know, what society, you know, is telling them that they should go, you know. And that's what's pulling him back from making that leap into the peak opaque. And so many people don't get to that point of making that decision for yourself to, yeah, it's scary. Yeah, I don't necessarily know what the results, quote unquote, consequences of my actions are going to be, but you have to trust yourself at a certain point to make that leap. Because unfortunately at the end, where we're left with Owen, I think it comes at such a interesting moment. He is working at this fun center, and it's during a birthday song, and they're all clapping happy birthday, which is just an interesting moment for that to happen, because it's a celebration of time passing, your birthday. And that's the moment where he just snaps.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Charlie. Happy birthday. You need to help me!
He realizes how trapped he is in this life, and looking around, and no one is looking at him or even reacting to him, which makes that moment feel even more isolating.
Well, in part too, like how I slightly took that is that they they're not actually experiencing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's almost maybe like we're outwardly hearing it and everything, but maybe that's just purely still inward, and like that he really still can't admit that outwardly.
We do have this like final moment of Owen after so much time has passed, opens himself up, literally opens himself
box
up,
cutter to the sternum.
Wow, what an image. To break
nice
that open.
And slow. No blood, don't worry.
No blood. Plenty of
static.
Plenty of static. And honestly, he looks so relieved. In that moment, he looks the most relieved. I think
still labored breathing, but you can see it's like in this like
he's like dreamy. You
yeah.
know? He's like euphoric almost. Followed up with this scene of him having to go like apologize.
Sorry about that before. Sorry about before. Just a new meditation. I'm sorry.
And we don't know really if Owen goes and buries himself to get to the Pink Opaque or what they do after this. It is left for that moment of, again, another great Jane quote talking about how, I'm going to read it. People even sympathetic to narratives of biological family estrangement still want to believe in a resolution or restorative reparative work. I think that does a disservice to queer people who are not in control of whether that work can be done. So Hollywood movies want to wrap things up in a nice little bow where, things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
Is that true to experience though? More likely not.
Yeah,
so
and
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, like a shortcoming of something can have a positive result, but it's like it's not all peaches and fucking cream the rest of your life. It's spicy guacamole.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not a true resemblance of a slice of life. Yeah. And where things are left feeling. And, you know, sometimes that is part of, I think, some of that, like, magical realism or something when you're a kid is how you view things, again, through media and stories, always has these types of fairy tale or positive resolves.
Happily
and really,
ever
like,
after.
that really marks you up that, that's what life is going to be. All you just get to this wonder state of everything is harmonious and it keeps you away from the true darker natures of life that we also need. Mm-hmm. We need the full spectrum of this like emotional field and plane that we live within to be able to have true appreciation, respect, love for the things that, you know, feel great. They're also driving forces for us. If people weren't troubled and hurt and in pain, we wouldn't have fucking art either. Any of these forms of art are obviously not forever and always just tied to that, but so much depth and range that we beautifully get from so many amazing people.
Yeah. I think we should nicely transitions us into the ride, actually.
Yeah.
Because I did want to bring up the point again about how Jane Schoenbrunn wrote this while they were transitioning. And this movie, I think, is a great representation of emotions. You know, it brings us all to a very similar emotional state. And makes us all, I think that makes us all as humans just kind of come together better, you know, seeing a movie like this and all feeling something from it. It's just a beautiful experience. And I just like love that experience that anyone can have with art. So I really appreciate them sharing their experience through this. And I really am interested to see their other work. They have quite a unique and beautiful eye for film and color and movement and for music and sound.
This isn't the Midnight Realm, Maddie. It's just the suburbs.
The Adventures of Pete and Pete, another big influence on Jane. They were in it too.
Fred Durst.
Oh my God, Fred Durst is Frank, the father, which I did not realize the first time I watched. A very creepy performance by Fred Durst. My God.
Yeah, and I mean, just the essence of who Fred Durst was at that time and everything. I mean, that it just ties into
90s baby,
into the essence of it all too, and the character type that he is playing. Yeah, I really appreciate this film.
Yes, I would love to close out this film by saying important movie. I think that everyone really should watch this movie. It's an experience. It's an experience I think that we should all go through, and we can all find something in it. And it's important to watch transgender movies so we can just talk about it more and have this just be more part of the horror discussion, film discussion, any discussion, you know. I think it's just important.
What about you? Do you like girls?
I think that I like TV shows.
Let's get to these Smash Pumpkins. And out of 5 Smash Pumpkins, how are you feeling about I Saw the TV Glow?
I Saw the TV Glow, Gallagher style. I'm going to give this a solid 4.
Solid 4. Very solid
clean,
4.
solid, clean smashed 4. A lot that I really liked. You know, like, we didn't get too critical on it just because we were so in depth with it. And I don't think there's too much that, like, especially through a couple interviews afterwards, there was like really this hammering in that the film was less narratively driven and more of this like emotional and nostalgic and like remembrance state, which is why, again, at the early part of this podcast, I was trying to just like speak to that point that we're in like the midpoint of kind of the film is where we're getting this narration from Owen.
I watched these tapes over and over again, but they never got old.
You know, it's just a choice, and it was just one that, like, when I first saw it in the minute, I was like, ugh, why are we... It just didn't feel resonant and necessary to the point, but in a state of, like, reflection and remembrance, and, like, you're in somebody's head, like, giving this, like, getting the exposition that way, I have a little more... acceptance or whatever, not feeling so nitpicky. And it's just an artistic choice. It doesn't mean that my thought or feeling on it is the right one either. It was just how it reflected on me in the moment. And just a little bit with how a little bit of this non-linear storytelling went about. It was executed well, I will say, but, we think of some of the tops who've done it, and going back, that callback to Tarantino earlier, I don't mean this to be such, again, a comparison aspect of things, but it's just... You see certain films that it's just like, holy shit, top front to back, and it's just like how that and I think of like, again, from a narrative nonlinear structure, we're thinking like Pulp Fiction, or we get to like like an Inception level mastery of plot device, and so it's like I could see myself going a little higher, but it's just like I think this movie's a very solid 4. Early work for them, and like for what they were going for and everything, they really knocked it out the park.
Yeah, and that is something to be considered too. Is like the second feature film, I believe, that they've made, and that's really impressive. I think I'm going to go just a little bit higher. I'm going to probably go 4.2, and I also took note of that stylistic choice of looking straight into the camera and delivering lines. Not my cup of tea either. I don't know why. It's just something about it that is off, and maybe that's what they were going for. And yeah, I think that first watch that you and I had, because we both had never seen it before and really didn't know what we were in for, it did take us a while to like trudge through what was going on before we were able to realize, oh, this is more of an experience film. I feel like the second time I watched it, I knew what I was going in for, and I was able to appreciate that a little bit more, of just like, okay, I'm just supposed to be feeling things. I'm not really supposed to be going along with plot points.
Creepiest kitty moment for me was I'm gonna go final. It was almost the dad. The scene of the dad with the TV on him. Really want to go there, but I had even a little bit of a tough time just the first time watching the final episode. Mr. Melancholy comes like right over her face, and you're just distorted voice. It was part of that voice is just like, and then like the effects on the moon face. It's like it's having this wrapping effect around the edges of his face, and just for some reason, because it's like so the frame is full of his face, you're really stuck in this moment, and it just like. I had a very like unnerved striked chord like initially seeing it. I was like, oh, that's great. I'm glad it's making me feel this way right now.
Oh, it definitely was, and the shit that he was saying was very
it was
fucked up.
it was fucked up.
We're gonna love the Midnight Realm. It's such a wonderful prison.
Drink my juice. Good one. Mine is going to be, first of all, yeah, I did think about putting the dad in there. It's a creepy fucking shot. But I think what really stuck with me, and even after that first viewing I kept thinking about, was Maddie's monologue of describing being buried alive.
And then finally, the first spadeful of dirt hit the top of the box.
And just that thought alone stuck with me and was horrifying to think about. Yeah, and a very well delivered monologue too by Jack Haven, by the way.
Yeah, and like how that imparted on Owen too, not just like what you're like viscerally getting from that character at the time, but knowing Owen's relation to them, not seeing them in so long, and then hearing all this and like that stark reality to their own existence is just like a crazy mind fuck.
I saw the TV glow. 2024. There it is. Watch it. Watch it.
Let it glow, baby.
Let it glow. Wow, another good one. Another good one in the
very
Deadlight
good.
Space.
And thank you for bringing this one forward. I mean, when it popped up last year and was getting buzz, I had a little bit, and especially just again the era we come from, our analog love here that we got. A film called I Saw the TV Glow that was just, there was a little bit of captivation just from that, but I never knew allegorically or anything what the film was about up until when we finally saw it. So it probably would have just continued to slip a little bit beneath the radar unless I had a little bit more of an urge or push or somebody to bring it into my space. So I'm glad that you presented it.
Yes, me too.
For us to watch, and I'm excited for more work.
Yeah, this is another one of those reminder movies of like just the expansion of the horror genre. We go from films that are like this, that are like super artsy, super steeped in real experiences, and tell such a beautiful, moving story. And then we have Thanksgiving. We have like the most ridiculous fucking movie you can possibly think of, but we're still within the horror genre. That's why I think it's so fun that we get to talk about movies. We get to have different experiences, not only watching them, but talking about them. They can be fun, they can be sad, they can be scary, they can be funny, all within this one genre. So that's my small rant of why I love this genre in general. This movie is just another reminder. It goes back to reminding me why I like this genre. Thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate you. Don't forget, like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, please.
Comment away. Write us a handwritten letter. Send it to 2156 West Wellington, and we'll have it sent over to us here via mail forwarding.
Exactly. Yeah, because we don't live there anymore.
No one does.
No one does. Big thank you to Playground Social Studios, where we are recording this.
Mike TV.
Mr. Mike TV with all of his big TVs.
Mr. Andrew Degner.
Mr. Andrew Degner with all of his cameras. We really appreciate you guys. And then make sure you follow us at the Deadlights Pod. You can follow me at BPPritchieT.
You can follow me at MR_Andreessen.
But until next time,
stay spooky, y'all.
Stay spooky, y'all. Whoa, I'm watching the TV glow. Whoa.